Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition and a specific Fast and Furious movie lens that I recently ran a campaign using for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition using a specific Fast and Furious lens. All right, so this was the second time I had done this, and this was a new additional Fast and Furious lens that I was using. And so when we ran this second campaign, which was 7 sessions, right? We used what we called the Fast and Furious Turbo lens. And when we used the Fast and Furious Turbo lens, we were using it in addition to the Fast and Furious Asphalt lens that I've already discussed. And so we were adding this up, right? So we had done a 5-session campaign with the Fast and Furious Asphalt lens, and then we added the Fast and Furious Turbo lens on top. And the reason why was there's some complexity to it. So we broke it up. We had 2 separate campaigns. The first campaign was 5 sessions. The second campaign was 7 sessions. And basically, when I ran this, I ran this specifically with Reggie, Norman, Becky, and Pat. And they're great players. I'm really fortunate to have them as a group. And they were, kind enough to go deeper down this kind of really unusual campaign path with me, right? So this is like a custom path that we built. So all of us were huge fans of the Fast and Furious movies, and we specifically liked the first 3 because those are the Fast and Furious movies that are focused on street racing, right? Specifically street racing. And that is important because the Fast and Furious 4 through 8 are really focused on international espionage, which we're like, what's that got to do with cars? So basically, this campaign, we called it the Fast and Furious Turbo lens, but it really revolved around the following sentence: "You owe me a 10-second sword," right? So basically, when we did this one, we all love the Fast and Furious movies, and the Fast and Furious movies are about having a cool car and modifying it, right? Modifying it visually, modifying it performance-wise, modifying it to drive the way you want, right? And so what we did was we wanted to capture that flair of building things and having a cool vehicle, but we used weapons to in the place of vehicles, because that's what fits in Dungeons and Dragons, right? So basically what we did was we did socketed weapons, right? And so the first things we did is, like in Fast and Furious 1, basically these awesome, amazing Japanese JDM cars that are built by Dominic Toretto's team, that's all funded by these night raids that they would do on tractor trailers, right? Well, one of the things that was required from the player characters is every month they would fund all of their buying of socketed weapons by funding monthly raids. They funded them by monthly raids on caravans that were coming into Vos Asamaros, right? So basically, in Fast and Furious, that whole thing is set in Los Angeles, and so we set our game in Vos Asamaros, right? And so, well, I tell you, I have really patient players. So basically, what we did was, first and foremost, we made it so that you could. The way we dealt with the socketed weapons was any weapon you wanted to, that you wanted to build, this way, you could build. You would have these socketed weapons, and the way we did it is we organized them exactly by Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition magical categories. So uncommon, we valued it at 500 gold pieces, and it was 1 gem. So you would socket 1 gem onto the weapon, and that socket could contain any spell up to 2nd level. The next one was rare. So you could have a socketed weapon that had a rare gem on it, and it was, and of course rare is 5k, and basically you would have 2 gems on this socketed weapon. The second gem would be up to 4th level. So these were cumulative. If you had a 2-socket weapon, it had one gem that contained any spell up to 4th level, and 1 gem that contained any spell up to 2nd level, right? So really, it would, so that item would be 5,500 gold, just purely from just adding the 2 up, right? But as soon as you get into that, right, of course, Dungeons and Dragons is like, hey, magic items aren't really even sold, especially the higher end ones. So I'll tell you how we dealt with that. So next, you would have a 3-gem socketed weapon. That third gem would be a very rare 50k worth gem, and basically that gem could be infused with one sixth level spell. So if you had one of these 3 gems, one gem was up to 6th level, one gem had a spell up to 4th level, and one gem had a spell up to 2nd level, right? Then, now that was very rare, and that was 50k. So you have a 50k spell, a 5k spell, and a 500 GP gold piece spell all on this one item. And the way that, it works in Dungeons & Dragons, these get even more expensive because they're combining additional, items, right? Fourth, you had a legendary socketed weapon that had 4 gems, and that 4th gem could have a gem up to 8th level in it, right? And then last was artifact. Oh, and by the way, that 8th level spell, we valued that at 500k, right? That 4th gem we valued because it was legendary at 500k. That's not even in the Game Master. We had to apply that, right? Last week was a 5-gem socketed weapon, right? So this thing contained 1 artifact gem that could contain a spell up to 9th level, and then of course it contained 1 legendary gem, 1 very rare gem, 1 rare gem, and 1 uncommon gem, right? And so, we valued that 1 gem, that artifact gem, at 5 million, right? 5 million gold pieces. So and basically, so this was the structure, right? Now, if you have these incredibly valuable weapons that have all these crazy spells that are infused into each of the gems, and I really let the players kind of like guide, what spell do you want to get put into this? Well, they would fund these by robbing from these caravans. They would fund these socketed weapons, and then they would also do trading, right? So they might trade 1 weapon in, like a a 2-socket gem weapon, and then they would complete a mini adventure for whoever they were getting the third, a 3rd socketed gem weapon from, right? And so that's one of the ways. The other thing, though, is because they were getting these incredibly high, powerful weapons, right? Basically, I put a caveat on it that basically when they were in the city of Vos Aramos, they could be challenged, right? And then when they're challenged, basically somebody would say, hey, I have a socketed weapon, you have a socketed weapon, I challenge you. And the way it worked was you would have to make a will save when you were challenged, right? If the person was 4 levels below your character or more, it was a very easy will save. You just had to make 5 or above. If it was 2nd level, it was easy, which you had to roll a 10 or higher. If they were 2 levels or below you, if the NPC that challenged you's level was medium was even with yours, it was a medium will save. So target number 15. If they were 2 levels higher than you, it became a hard will save, right? And basically you would have to roll a 20, right? And then if they were 4 levels higher than you, it would become a very hard roll with target number 25. And last, if they were 6 levels or higher than you, it would become nearly impossible, and you had to roll a 30, right? Which a 30 target number. Now, this actually did get ugly in the game. Becky actually lost her character in the 3rd session when she was killed in one of these duels. Her player character was actually killed in one of these duels. So we actually brought her back in, and she had to start with a new character with a 1-socket weapon, and the rest of the player characters had at this point like 2 or 3 socket weapons each. So that was a little bit of a bump in the road. Of course, like I said, I have really patient players, and Becky just kind of like it was helpful. She really, even though that was a little frustrating for her as a player, she kind of bore with it, which was good. The other thing that we added was we put kind of a structure on Vos Aramos where most of the weapons were being forged by dwarves. They were either being forged in Vos Aramos or they were being forged in Dwarven Mountains and being brought in by dwarves. We also said that the elves of the city would actually were handling all the gems. They were gems that were coming in that belonged to the Elven Kingdom, and that they were being sold at very, very high prices, specifically because the Elven Kingdoms had some goals that they were trying to accomplish at the time, and they needed the gold more than they needed the gems at the time, right? And then last, the Dragonborns did so. Basically, the dwarves were bringing in all the weapons and supplying the weapons for the socketed weapons, and the elves were supplying the gems. But the Dragonborn were the main drivers. There were, on all of these, there were other lineages that were involved in helping with these, but the main drivers were dwarves, elves, and then last, the Dragonborns were the main drivers behind the builds and the modifications, right? So you could have your 3 socketed weapons, and then if you wanted to keep 2 of your gems and remove 1 gem and put in a new gem, right? And then we even got into the point where the Dragonborns were actually making unusual interactions between the spells. This was super fun. We had a blast with it. The players really, really had a great time with it. I was so pleased that this went as well as it did. It was definitely worth diverting our regular campaign, and we really just had a great time with it. But I will say, if you're going to use this, of course, everybody at the table has to have a respect and a love for the Fast and Furious movies, or this kind of game is not going to work. So I just wanted to share with you some of the campaigns I've been running, and just give you some details on how we're kind of modifying the rules to embrace a love of theater, and specifically a love of the JDM culture that is evident in Fast and Furious 1, 2, and 3. Thank you very much for letting me share my ideas with you today, and just give you a kind of a report on some of my recent play sessions. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.